Authorities realise that it's almost impossible to prove. And therein lies the rub, because you can just let it go, and you can't prove it.
Oh, well, I don't think there's the slightest doubt. I picked it up in the lagoon, and indeed the lagoon was immediately shut as unsafe for bathing. And the local MP, Mike Ellis, made a great fuss about it, and I know that it was cordoned off for quite a while.
But it's like closing the stable door after the horses bolted. People become extremely ill before the authorities wake up to the high E.Coli levels and only then close the beach or put up a warning sign. Right across the country there are extremely high incidents of diarrhea with 43,000 deaths each year, and people living in informal settlements are the worst affected. Hout Bay residents have been lobbying the city of Cape Town for years about the raw sewage and rubbish dumped directly into the stormwater drains.
What they did, they put in this very temporary band-aid with the retention ponds, and they put in some pipes, but the pipes were so narrow that it can't take the massive flow of sewage, because the pipes were blocked most of the time. And they put in a pump, which never worked.
This stormwater drain is supposed to be diverted into the sewage system, but it's almost always blocked.
Winter rains come and flush the township. That's essentially, it's like flushing a giant toilet, because everything that's been sitting there just gets flushed into the river, and that's when it's a lethal cocktail.
As het winter is, dan loop die water van daar dwars deur rivier toe. Maar nou kom dit hierdie soorieslyn nou hier.
The lack of maintenance and inadequate funding is the slow disaster that has been happening right across the Cape Flats. Democratic Alliance councillor Bert van Dalen has been putting the spotlight on the sanitation crisis and pressuring the city council to admit it has a problem.
Funding for sewage works and for infrastructure has gotten behind in what is needed. We want to sensitize council and the people to our problem that we have, so that we can turn this about.
Councillor Clive Justice is the mayoral committee member for utility services. He says they inherited a collapsing sewage system where inadequate funds were allocated to maintenance, but claims that things are changing.
In terms of sanitation services, we've moved from 75 million rand in 2006 to this year close to 300 million rand.
Compounding the problem is that when the city was consolidated into a metropole, retirement packages were offered to senior staff and a treasure trove of institutional knowledge was lost, while 30% of vacated posts stayed empty in an attempt to meet racial quotas. Kevin Sampson is the manager of wastewater in the city of Cape Town.
We've lost several of the top and experienced engineers, whilst we're getting younger junior people into the city. I think that experience loss is having a debilitating effect on the way we do operations.
Cape Town is surrounded by smaller municipalities whose sewage systems are failing and polluting rivers because of a lack of maintenance and funds, and these toxic rivers drain across the Cape Flats.
I can quote you a local politician in one of these towns that once told me out straight, there are no votes in sewage. In other words, he will only put his political will to something that can benefit the political process.
The historic tourist mecca and university town of Stellenbosch is one of those municipalities. They recently admitted they pump sewage into the rivers because they cannot cope. This is where the Plankenberg River meets the Easter River in Stellenbosch. The smell from this water is absolutely shocking. I am in fact in the heartland of Stellenbosch, surrounded by some of the country's most affluent homes. This water flows downstream and goes past our top vineyards, and it's used for agricultural purposes, and it eventually lands up in our beaches.
I promise you, no one does anything. The last answer I got was, oh, we must hope and pray that the rain comes quick. I mean, no, that's not the answer, man. But no one from the municipality, only the workers have been here.
Rodney Russell pays over 6,000 rand a month for rates, water, lights and sewage. When he moved here 20 years ago, his children swam and fished in the river. Today, he says they would die if they touched it. He wasn't wrong. On his advice, we returned at night to sample the river when the smell is reported to be at its worst, and discovered raw feces floating past, and the E.Coli count was an astonishing 330,000 per 100 mils.
I promise you, it's unbearable. You have a braai on a Sunday and that smell comes through you. You throw your meat away. You don't want it. You don't want to eat.